People will lose a son or daughter who may have gone out and may have made a bad decision, but like not even knowing that this fentanyl is in like a drug they take or something, and then they die. And so you're knowingly doing that, knowing what the results are. So we're going to treat you like the murderer that you are. We had over 100,000 Americans die from drug overdoses last year. The vast majority of them are from opioids, including fentanyl. And this is not just limited, of course, to towns on the U.S.-Mexico border. This is happening all across the United States and communities in every corner of the United States. Now, in Florida, we have fought back, probably more than any state has fought back. And it's not just having 50 illegal aliens go to Martha's Vineyard. Now, that got a lot of news. They don't care about the other towns being overrun, but if you pierce their little cocoon in Martha's Vineyard, then it was like all hell broke loose. They got really upset about that. But that shined a light on this issue probably more than any single action has done. Of course, that was not even close to all that we have done. We had people in 2021 at the request of the Texas governor. I was the first state, Florida was the first state to answer the call for increased border security. We've also done things more recently as we started to see boats coming from Haiti and from Cuba, and the Coast Guard dumped like a couple hundred a couple months ago in the Florida Keys. So I declared a state of emergency, and the Coast Guard actually is good to work with, but Biden will not send additional support. So they're stretched very thin. So we declared a state of emergency, and we've surged our resources to help the Coast Guard. So you actually have Florida Fish and Wildlife, FDLE, our agencies out there stopping these boats from Haiti, and then we bring them to the Coast Guard. Coast Guard takes them and brings them back to Haiti. I mean, so that is something that when we did the state of emergency, you've seen a huge drop now in the number of vessels and in the number of people that have been able to make landing in the Florida Keys. And then the ones that did come, the Biden administration actually sent them to either California or Texas, so they weren't even released in our state. And look, we would have arranged transport out of our state if they were released here. But that's that. So this we're having a great effect, and basically I'm going to keep those operations going as long as they need to go. You can't just have hundreds of people dumped down in southern Florida and think that that's a sustainable thing. So we've made a big difference, and we're going to continue to make a big difference. But you've seen, even with us doing a lot of the stuff we've done, in addition to sending to down to Texas, in addition to the Maritime interdictions, in addition to the illegal alien transport, we have done legislation and signed legislation cracking down on all government contractors who use illegal alien labor. We've also signed legislation prohibiting government contracts with any private entity that is facilitating Biden's policies. And you do have some of these, quote, nonprofit groups that are facilitating people coming through Mexico across our border. If you're engaged in that, you are violating the law, and you're not going to do business with the state of Florida. We've also signed legislation in Florida, just like most states, you got to be eligible, you got to be here legally to be able to work, but enforcing that can be difficult. And so, we have employment verification that we beefed up, not enough, and I'm going to address that in a minute, but we've been able to hold some of these businesses accountable who are knowingly employing illegal immigrant labor. We also signed legislation cracking down on opioid dealers and traffickers, including increasing the mandatory minimum sentence. When you're dealing in fentanyl, you're killing people. I mean, you talk about just a little bit, and this is done. And so people will lose a son or daughter who may have gone out and may have made a bad decision, but like not even knowing that this fentanyl is in like a drug they take or something, and then they die. And so you're knowingly doing that, knowing what the results are. So we're going to treat you like the murderer that you are. And I also petitioned the Florida Supreme Court in 2021 to impanel a statewide grand jury. And so these are things that we're able to do from time to time under Florida's Constitution. When I first became governor, we did one on the school security in the aftermath of the Parkland massacre, and that ended up leading to the resignation of the superintendent, replacing 4 school board members, a lot of recommendations to be able to make things better. And then more recently, in December of last year, we petitioned and the Supreme Court granted the ability to impanel a statewide grand jury looking at misrepresentations regarding mRNA vaccine. Because, they said that if you take it, you won't get COVID. They wanted mandates. They wanted all this. That turned out not to be true, and there's been a whole host of things that have come out. So that is ongoing right now. And we also did, though, 2021, we impaneled on illegal immigration. So we have a statewide grand jury impaneled now on illegal immigration. They can issue recommendations and issue reports, and they have issued some recommendations, and so we're going to be implementing some of those recommendations here today. But we need to do everything in our power to protect the people of Florida from what's going on at the border and the border crisis. And so we're announcing a number of, I think, really timely initiatives that we're going to be working with the legislature on to get this done in the upcoming legislative session. First, we're going to increase the penalties, and this is something that the grand jury recommended, increase the penalties for human smuggling. And so if you have people that are bringing into the state of Florida, people that are here illegally, it's going to be a 3rd-degree felony if you're doing that, and a 2nd-degree felony if they're aggravating circumstances. We also say that it's a separate offense for each individual transported, concealed, or harbored. And then when people are being transported, even though they may not have violated this, they're going to be detained as material witnesses. If you hold people accountable, they're not going to want to do this. But we need to update our laws to be able to get this done. We are also going to, so right now in Florida, you have to be legal to work, but businesses can either use E-Verify or they have the option of maintaining documents like I-9 or whatever. Well, that would require an audit to uncover some of the stuff. And so although we've been able to hold some accountable, it hasn't been effective enough. And so we're working with Blaise Angolia and the legislature to require all employers in Florida to use E-Verify to determine employment eligibility. And this will expand from our current requirements, which are just with public employees and with contractors with the state of Florida. But if you have the ability to have different types of enticements, you're going to end up having more people that are going to want to come illegally. If you remove the enticement of employment, then they're not going to want to come illegally to the state of Florida. So that's a huge, huge issue. Now, Florida correctly prohibits driver's licenses for illegal aliens, and we will continue to prohibit that. However, what local governments are doing is they're trying to circumvent that. They're trying to use nonprofits, use their funds, give money to nonprofits, and have nonprofit groups create ID cards for people here illegally. And that's just a way to try to evade the current state law. So our proposed legislation will prohibit that practice. Local governments will not be able to provide funds to issue ID cards to illegal aliens, and the legislation will invalidate all out-of-state licenses that have been given to illegal aliens. You see other places, San Francisco, New York City, now Washington, D.C., once illegal, or actually foreigners to vote, illegal aliens, or even like diplomats. Like, are you going to have some diplomat from the CCP voting in D.C. elections? I mean, it's insane what they're trying to do. So we don't allow that. And we've actually, with our election crime unit that I instituted with the legislators' help last year, You've actually seen illegal aliens prosecuted in Florida now for voting illegally, because some of them say, no one asked me. They just said I could vote, so I signed up and did it. So our bill will require, when you register to vote, that you affirm or swear under penalty of perjury that you are a United States citizen. And so if you check that box and you're not, then you're opening yourself up to prosecution. And we need to make sure that we want all citizens here that want to vote, but we don't want anybody here voting illegally. And if you're not a citizen of this country, you should not be voting in our elections. We're also going to require hospitals to collect data on how much it costs to provide health care to people in our state illegally. I mean, this is something that we estimate to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, but that's just the estimate based on very limited data. It may be much more, and that's one of the costs that we talk about people coming across the border illegally. Yes, some bring drugs, but most of them don't. Some are criminal aliens, but most of them are not. But even if you're not involved in any type of drugs, crime, going into communities you have millions now going across the country, that puts a stress on the education system, on public safety, and on health care. And I think you see that in every state, including the state of Florida. So we want those costs identified, and we want to be able to go to the people of Florida and let them know, and this is almost all uncompensated care that taxpayers are having to pick up, just what the costs of these border policies are. And then finally, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, I don't know why they did this in Florida before I became governor, but they're letting illegal aliens become licensed attorneys in Florida. It's like, how could you be violating the law and then be practicing the law? So we're going to end that practice to make sure that you're legal. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is, in the face of a failed federal administration, neglect at the border, honestly intentional of what's going on at the border because it fits their vision, we're fighting back on behalf of Floridians. And I think if other states mimic the proposals that have been put forth today in the proposed legislation that Blaise Ngolia has, it's going to make a big difference. And it's really going to, I think, force the federal government to get with the program and to finally secure and defend the borders of the United States of America. So we are going to be very happy to see this progress made here in the state of Florida, and it'll make a really big difference. We have enough people that want to come from these blue states. We can't also take everybody from other countries illegally. I mean, it's hard enough. The state's getting very crowded.